Wow, is she actually posting something on time for once? A wrap up that isn't in the middle of the month? Who would have thought? I had a really mediocre reading month in April. I don't have any really strong opinions. Everything was just sort of lukewarm. There was like one or two standouts, but that was about it. So I thought a great way to spice this video up is to do a fight or run away for the main character of each book and tell you if I would either fight them or run away. And I read a lot of thrillers this month, so this should be interesting. And I know there's been some other videos as well out there that are about fighting characters, so they're linked in the description. Full credit to them and their ideas. This is not original. I want to talk about the 2 non-fiction books that I read this month. Both of those books were better than all of the fiction books that I read this month. The first book that I read was A Night to Remember by Walter Lord. First of all, what a fantastic name. I bet he had the best nicknames in school. Thank you so much to Angela Rose Reeds, who suggested that I read this book to learn more about the Titanic. It was really, really good. I wasn't expecting to be so, I want to say entertained, but I feel like that's not a great word to use for a disaster, or a book about a disaster, but it was captivating. I think there were like 65 different survivors and people who were involved that this author pulled from. And so you got the perspectives of people from different parts of the ship. You got the perspectives of people who made it to the boats and were able to survive and get onto the other ship. You know, you get to hear about a man who dressed up in a shawl to try and escape with all the women and children first. You hear about how horrible it was to be floating in the water waiting for the other boats to arrive. There's this one lady, Mrs. Brown, who was on a boat and the drunk official was like, we need to go, and Mrs. Brown was like, nuh-uh, we're staying here, we're gonna go back and rescue some people who were in the water drowning. She was a legend. But I think what I appreciated most about this book is that it gave a really great historical perspective on why this disaster was so impactful at the time. Living their best life, and they were very optimistic about the future and about technology and about the general trajectory of humanity. But the Titanic sinking was kind of a reminder that humanity is not infallible and terrible things happen. It kind of reminded me of the Challenger disaster, in that at that time we were all like, oh my gosh, we are making it into space, we're making it into the moon, we are amazing, and then this one thing sort of takes that confidence all the way down and everybody is just so shook by it. They were so confident that the Titanic wasn't going to sink that newspapers the next day after it happened reported that there were no casualties, that everybody was rescued off that ship, which is mind-boggling to me. I also really appreciated how the author talked about the people in third class not surviving at the same rates as people in first class, and he talked about how afterwards newspapers didn't really interview many people who were in the third class, and when this was discussed in Parliament and when legislation was being brought up, people from the third class weren't really involved in any of those discussions. There was a lot of racism around the event as well. It felt to me like an event that really captured a lot of that time period. Anyway, I've talked about this too much. I gave it 4 stars. It was fantastic. Okay, the second non-fiction book that I read. Here's how you know that you read a good book. This is what my sticky tabs looked like before I started reading the book, and this is what they look like after. I read The 7 Necessary Sins for Women and Girls by Mona Eltahawy. I cannot believe I didn't know who this person was before I picked up this book, and this book is so explosive and powerful. It's just clearly, my mind was blown on every single one of these tabs. This is a book about feminism. It is sort of a play on the 7 deadly sins, but it's the 7 necessary sins for women and girls. So these sins are anger, attention, profanity, ambition, power, violence, and lust. And each chapter goes through one of those sins and talks about it in detail. What I loved so much about this book was that it's not just like a superficial type of women need equal pay, let's burn the bras type of thing, which is important, but this is depicting patriarchy as a global force which impacts every single person in the world. And, oh, sorry, I just realized my hair clip has fallen out and has been just dangling in my hair for like this entire video. Anyway, the patriarchy. It's global, it's powerful, it talks about revolution, it talks about countries where women are not able to do the things that they want to do. Gloria Steinem blurbed it. Eltahawy is an Egyptian-American journalist and activist, very grounded in her beliefs, and this book explains why in such a great way. Obviously, she's a fantastic writer. The way she lays out her arguments is very strong and very understandable. Even though I might not be on board 100% with everything Mona Eltahawy has to say, my thoughts were challenged challenged. This book is also very current. I think it was published last year, and it talks about Donald Trump, talks about Cardi B, talks about Doctor Who, talks about Rashida Tlaib, talks about all of the atrocities that are committed against women around the world. You will think, you will be uncomfortable, you will definitely learn something. 5 stars, love. Whew. Now I'm all riled up. I'm ready to fight some characters. Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. I included these in my March wrap up, even though I hadn't completely finished Crooked Kingdom yet, but I sort of read them over end of March, start of April. 5 stars. What do you want me to say? The way that Leigh Bardugo puts an internal and external conflict on every single character, but then like weaves them into the same plot, which all makes sense in the end, is just so crazy. The character development is some of the best in YA. It's probably the best in YA. I would run away. I wouldn't fight any of these characters because first of all, I would lose. Second of all, they have had enough trauma without some random chick coming and trying to fight them. And third of all, I am too emotionally attached to them, so I'm not laying a hand on any of them. Now let's get into the thrillers I read. The first thriller I read this month was Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. So what happened was I tried to film a required reading video, which is a series that I do where I try and read 3 of the most sort of hyped books of a genre. So I was trying to do one for thrillers, but I just read a bunch of thrillers and had nothing to say about them. And this was one of them. It was partly my fault because I spoiled myself for the ending, but this book is about a girl who is apartment sitting at this really fancy hotel. I think it's a hotel or apartment building. It's a really rich type of building, and she is kind of in her mid-20s. She's just been laid off from her job. She doesn't have a lot of money. She just got kicked out of her apartment, and so she's getting paid to live in this really fancy hotel. Dream come true, right? But of course there's something much more sinister going on. I just wasn't very gripped by this, and some of the decisions that the main character made, I was like, what are you doing? Like, clearly something shady is going on with this whole apartment thing and you just don't even care. Like, you're like, oh, well. I did appreciate how her lack of finances was contributing to her inability to move or get out of that situation. I really liked the class commentary there. And there were times when I enjoyed it, but for the majority of the book, it was like when you are watching a movie and then they all hear a thud and then that one person wants to go investigate and that's the main character. And I'm like, oh no, don't go investigate. I think my expectations were also too high for this because after reading The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware last month, I have set such high expectations for thrillers now and it's kind of making everything else turn into a bit of a disappointment. I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. Would I fight the main girl who I forgot the name of? Absolutely. She's about my age, first of all, so I think physically we'd be kind of matched. And clearly if something bad happens to her, she doesn't feel the need to go to the police, so I'd probably get off scot-free. Next, I read The Good Daughter by Karen Slaughter. This was pretty goddamn disgusting. Trigger warnings for child rape, gun violence, school shootings. Obviously, Karen Slaughter is known for having more of those graphic depictions of violence. This is about a family of lawyers, the dad and his 2 adult daughters. Something horrible happened to them when the daughters were young, and this book is kind of about them trying to reconnect through this case of a school shooting. Weird way to heal your family wounds, but there you go. I gave this 3.5 stars because while I really enjoyed the characters and I thought they were really strong, I loved the dad lawyer. He was great. Rusty was his name. We all love Rusty. I think the story just really dragged in the middle. It was exciting at the beginning and the end, and in the middle was just kind of a lot of character building that, I don't know, I feel like we could have done without a lot of it. I think maybe the characterization just could have been a bit more succinct. So there are 2 main characters, Charlotte and Samantha, who are the sisters. Charlotte is a bit more, I'd say, spontaneous and like risk-taking, and Samantha is very polished. Her look is kind of described as like a vampire. She's very, very good at practicing the law. She also walks with a cane, so that was kind of like some cool representation to get. And for both of them, I would run away. I wouldn't fight either of these women. Anyone who survived what they did, I'm backing out. These girls do not give up in a fight. Maybe I should put my bandana on so I can learn to fight better. Oh wait, how do you put on a bandana? I messed up. Next I read The Whisper Man by Alex North. Thank you to Kasey from Kasey Can Read for suggesting this to me. I'm sorry it didn't make my thriller video, but I still really enjoyed it. I gave this 4 stars. This book is about a series of abductions and murders of young boys. that happened 20 years ago. And now we're 20 years into the future and we're following a man called Tom, who is a writer, and his wife has recently died, leaving him with his young boy, Jake. And Tom and Jake are really having a hard time connecting with each other and understanding each other. Jake is very quiet and doesn't really open up, and Tom feels like he is a disappointment and that he is not being a good dad. Throughout this entire book, that's like his biggest fear, is that he's not being a good dad. And so when Jake starts to hear whispers and they move into this new house, they have to learn to trust each other and also figure out who is once again luring young boys away from their homes. I didn't really love the police investigation aspect of this book, which I think is something that I'm learning about myself, that I don't really love the detective side of things as much as I love the more emotional father-son relationship part of this book, seeing that dynamic, because there aren't really a lot of father-son relationships that I've read about, and this was by far the best one. Would I fight Tom? I'm not gonna lie, us writers are pretty bashable. Like, we're pretty easy to beat up. There is a scene where Tom fights somebody in this book and he's described as a pretty big guy. Plus, if his son is involved, like, I'm backing away. So I think I would run away. What are we learning here? We're learning that Lauren is a coward. I like to talk the talk but not walk the walk. After that, I read Lady Midnight by Cassandra Clare. This is always a fun series to go back into. I always get her series names confused, so I'm never ever going to say what the right series of this is. I'm trying. But this is the first book in the Dark Artifices series. It's on the cover. I haven't read The Mortal Instruments. I've read The Infernal Devices, but I basically skipped 6 books in this series, so I have no idea what the context was for this. I don't need to explain what these are, but it's about a bunch of people who hunt demons and monsters, and it follows Emma Carstairs, who is trying to figure out who murdered her parents 5 years ago. I mean, these books are just really light and fun, and they bring me back to my high school days of reading YA. The character conflicts, as always in Cassandra Clare's books, are so good. It reads a lot like a fan fiction, because this is kind of what Cassandra Clare does. She wrote some books, and then she wrote fan fiction of those books, and then she wrote fan fiction of those books, and now it just keeps going on and on and on. And it's really fun. I didn't really care about Emma and Julian's relationship that much. Like, the angst was there, but I didn't really get, like, the angst was there, but as far as the actual relationship building, I was like, where is it? I see no chemistry. They were just sort of like, oh, they grew up together and they've always been in love. And I'm like, oh, that's nice. I don't know, I would have liked to see a bit more banter or something, but it wasn't a big problem. The big problem I had was, why did she name all of the siblings so close together? Why is it going from Ty to Tavi to Livy and you're introduced to all of them at once? Maybe I'm just stupid and I can't keep things straight. That's probably mostly what the issue was. I gave this a good old 3.5 stars. It was fun, and I am reading Lord of Shadows right now. So, okay, the main character in this book, Emma Carstairs, is a shadow hunter, which means she is an absolute badass and she has this big ass sword. Let me give you a hint. If somebody has a weapon that they've named, don't fight them. I am running the hell away from Emma Carstairs. I am not fighting her. I'm not fighting anyone in this book, because they're all supernatural creatures, first of all, or they have had a lifetime of training in being a murderer. So I'm gonna go ahead and run away. We are definitely learning that I'm a coward. The last book that I read this month was called Vixen. This is 1920s Chicago flapper lifestyle. This is what Gossip Girl is if you put it in the 1920s. Sebastian is Chuck Bass. Lorraine is season 1 Blair. Gloria is Serena. Clara is Taylor Momsen? How do you say her name? Her character. The characters were very stereotyped and not that well developed. We're basically just following like their sort of social circles. The main girl in here wants to be a flapper and a singer, and there are a lot of romances going on. The characters were very flat and not developed and kind of just like cardboard characters. I could have put this down at any point and not been bothered to finish it. I would have probably forgotten about it. That being said, it was still fun. The romances were kind of cute. There was an interracial relationship, which was cool. There was a girl who was a flapper but was pretending that she wasn't. But then there was also a character with dwarfism who was named Thor, and he was a gangster. And he wasn't portrayed in the best light. This is kind of trashy, and there were some questionable things going on. If you're looking for some 1920s stuff, be aware of that, but this wasn't the worst 1920s book I've ever read. It really made me appreciate how Libba Bray and the Diviners didn't romanticize the era as much as this book does, and as much as a lot of 1920s books do. I'm giving this book a very generous 2 stars. Would I fight them or would I run away? I would fight any of these characters because honestly, they're all flat anyway. Their character development is so thin that I could just probably tap them and they'd fall over. They barely have enough development to stand up on their own anyway. I'd win that. Okay. That was my April wrap-up, a very weird wrap-up. I'm really hoping I read some better stuff in May, because I feel like I've just been reading really mediocre books lately. But this has been my April wrap-up, a very weird one. Thank you for sticking around for it. Let me know what you read this month, and if it went better than my reading month, and if you would fight any of these characters, and I'll see you in the next one.